is electric.
Welcome back for May's solar and energy usage video. It's been a bit of an odd month, has May. It started really good. You can see this in the statistics here. The orange lines, 40, almost 50 kilowatt hours in a day to start the month off, with just one bad day on the 3rd. And then the cloud, and then the rain. And it's a bit of a theme this year, isn't it? So much water, so much rain. Most months have been lower in solar production, but it's been a very, very wet year so far. It makes me wonder, if the ground is so soaked and the underground water is so full, if we have just a couple of really heavy downpours, flooding could be awful this year. But on the positive side, May's been really noticeably brighter than April. So it has felt like we've had a lot of sunshine, we've got a lot more energy, and the statistics back that up. We've had 1,023 kilowatt hours, a megawatt hour of generation. Sadly, even a megawatt hour of generation is the second worst we've had. So if you look at the dark blue columns there, 523 kilowatt hours for our main solar array is actually the second worst we've had. And that's consistent with our Solaredge array, the 296 kilowatt hours on the green line. That's the second worst we've had too. But the third array, the east-facing array on the gable that we have, and our garage panels, those have actually performed the worst so far out of the 3 years we've had it. So obviously I'm interested in why one array has a comparably worse performance this May than the other arrays have had. And looking at that specific array, the east-facing gables, etc., what I can see is the highs are not as high as they have been on other years, and the lows are much lower than they have been in other years. Plus, there's an average decline that's occurring this year. So it looks like it's just a weather-based issue. We haven't had such good weather. And because these panels are facing east, it must be that the mornings haven't been as good. Nothing to be really concerned about, though. So our third array, that's the gable panels facing east and the 3 panels facing south over the garage, 2.5 kilowatt Solis inverter, generated 204 kilowatt hours this month. The main array that we have, 3.68 kilowatt inverter, again a Solis inverter with 3.9 kilowatts of solar panels, south facing on the roof, 523 kilowatt hours for May. That leaves our Solaredge array. That's 8 300-watt panels, 2.4 kilowatts of solar panels, and a 2 kilowatt Solaredge inverter. That generated 296 kilowatt hours for the month of May. The number of kilowatt hours per kilowatt of solar panels installed for our 3 arrays is as follows: 134.1 for our main array, that's the 3.9 kilowatts and 3.68 kilowatt inverter. The gable panels and the garage roof panels, that's the 2.9 kilowatt array, just 70.34. So you can see it doesn't perform anywhere near as well. The Solaredge 2.4 kilowatt array, that's with the panels facing in exactly the same way as the 3.9 kilowatt array, 123.33. Again, as I've said many times before, our Solis inverter outperforms the Solaredge inverter. One of the reasons why I keep this sort of data in a spreadsheet is the historical analysis. So just looking at this image here, a snapshot of just the months of 2024, these numbers, the number of kilowatt hours per kilowatt of solar panels installed, it's really good to see how it changes over time and the proportions and how they're different. I mean, that 2.9 kilowatt array, just 15 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of solar panels in January, but now it's up to 70. I really like looking at these statistics and understanding how my generation is changing over the year by different array. I mean, I can't go back and install them all perfectly because, you know, your house is facing a certain way, you've got certain obstacles in the way, there's not a lot you can do for it. But understanding what's going on and why really does help you appreciate the system and the numbers that you have. This chart showing solar power generation, not kilowatt hours, but kilowatts, the instantaneous power we're getting, is really useful because I can see on most days in May, at some point, we were getting well over 6 kilowatts of generation. We're definitely peaking and maxing things out at 7.4 kilowatts. That's about the maximum I ever get. So there's nothing wrong with the arrays. They're all working fine on a clear sunny day, and the parts of the day where it is sunny, we're getting good generation. But obviously, at some parts in the day, we're not getting good generation. It's been raining and cloudy. And 5 of those days, not a lot of solar generation at all. Moving on to the energy side then, how did we use that solar energy? What did we do with it? And how much energy did we import from the grid? So let's start with the Octopus Intelligent. That's what we're using for import energy from the grid, 375.37 kilowatt hours. So quite a lot. Normally it would be hardly anything because I've got so much solar power, and I could not import anything from the grid if I wanted. But because it's cheaper to do so at 7.5 pence and then export all the solar energy at 15 pence, that's why we're importing so much from the grid, because it pays us to do it. And it's actually a really easy way of managing things. When you are trying to self-consume, you're spending more effort trying to consume your solar energy and make sure you export as little as possible. Now that I am being paid quite well for the export, everything's much more relaxed and easy. So I quite like this way. I've got to say I'm quite impressed with this number, 930.84 kilowatt hours exported. So we only generated 1,023 and we exported 930 of them. Now, partly that means we're exporting and not using lots of solar energy, but partly that means we're putting some energy into the battery overnight, and then I'm exporting from the battery overnight as well. When we get to sunset, I turn the export up to about 450 to sometimes 950 watts continuously until midnight. So we're exporting to the grid because it's financially viable to do so. But I'm not emptying my battery. I'm only dumping out probably 10, 20, 30% of it. Impressively, 930 is 91% of 1,023. We are exporting most of what we're generating. Looking at the year-to-date figures, we've imported 2,682 and we've exported 2,455. It won't be long and we'll have exported more than we've imported for the entire year. Looking at these numbers, though, it makes you think, oh, we're quite even, it's not costing us anything. But don't forget, we're being paid twice as much for export. So once we're at half as much export as we've imported, then we're at break even. So we're already comfortably in profit this year, having exported nearly as much as we've imported, but gained twice the price, 15 pence instead of 7.5 pence. Moving on to hot water then, we've used 1,704 litres of hot water this month, estimated from Mixergy. That's the hot water tank that we use. It has two sections in it, unlike a traditional hot water tank. It has a hot section and a cold section, the theory being when you draw off some hot water, the tank, the hot water side, doesn't mix with cold water and dilute and reduce the temperature. Only the cold water section then fills up even more while the hot section contracts. So you keep the hot water at a higher temperature for longer and don't have to heat as much. I do need to do a Mixergy tank review video. I did one when I first had the tank installed, but now we've had it a couple of years and we've started to enhance and be quite smart with Home Assistant as to how we automate its heating. I would like to do a separate video and cover that. This May, around the 23rd, I made a change to our Home Assistant automation, and I love looking at this data to be able to see whether my changes are having a positive effect. So if you look at the top half of this graph, the current charge, the blue line, you can see around the 23rd of May, there's suddenly a consistent drop in the current charge number. So a hot water tank isn't heating to a higher percentage. We haven't got more than 25-30% of hot water in the tank. But if 30% is all we need and the temperature of the hot water is at 50 degrees, which it is, we always have hot water when we need it, then that's a good thing because we're not heating more than we need. So that little fine tuning that I've done recently, it's worked. And some good news on the cold water front. This is from our water meter from Anglian Water. 4,046 litres is what we used in May. And that's quite good and quite consistent here that we're quite low users of water. They have now reduced our direct debit to £15 a month. So I'm very, very happy with that. Using rainwater to wash the cars is probably one of the things that contributes towards such a low bill. I do collect rainwater in two different butts and it empties quite quickly. I use a lot of water to wash the cars quite often, but thankfully with all of this rain, it's been refilled quite often. We use a Victron inverter to manage the charging and discharging of our Pylon Tech batteries. And this is one of the charts from the VRM system from Victron. It's showing where we're consuming energy. So the yellow is solar consumed, the blue is battery consumed, and the red is grid consumed. So what you can see is we are consuming more energy from the grid, not from solar energy and not from the battery. What this doesn't show, though, is the amount of battery being exported to the grid. This is the chart from Victron that shows how we're doing with the battery, though. It's the blue section that's of interest just for the battery. And basically, the higher the blue line goes, using the scale on the right-hand side, we're getting close to 100%. Do we fill the battery? And you can see we don't fill it to 100% every single day. I fill the battery from the grid each day until 90% on cheap rate energy, so that charging finishes at 5:30 in the morning. I then set the charge rate of the Victron down to just 1 or 2 amps, so it's not going to charge more than 50 or 100 watts throughout the day. So if we have a low usage day, and also it keeps charging at 100 watts continuously during the day, sometimes it gets to 100%, but more often than not, it doesn't. If I don't need to fill it to 100%, then there's no point doing it. I might as well save the battery the stress of forcing that energy in when it's so full. Then looking at the chart to see how low that blue line goes down the right-hand scale shows me how much of the battery we're consuming on any day. So most of the time we're not going below 60 or 70%. But on a few of the days there, yeah, it looks like we went down to 50 or 40%. So that was me testing and trying out how much I can export from the battery and how that feels and looks in the statistics. So the low days there, where the blue is the widest, that's when we have exported more to the grid from the battery. Again, we're doing that to save a little bit of money. For every kilowatt hour we export, we get 15 pence. For every kilowatt hour I recharge the battery, it's only costing us 7.5 pence. Interesting here also is the numbers at the bottom of the screen. They're not quite the same as the numbers I've reported so far. So the Victron view of what happened with solar is 1,041 kilowatt hours. It uses a separate monitor, not the same monitors that the other applications use. And exported to the grid 909 kilowatt hours. Imported from the grid 389. So it's quite close, but not absolutely accurate. The My Energy numbers are different again. It thinks we generated just a little bit more, but the export and import energy are quite similar to the Victron numbers, so not too bad after all. And it says we've been 32% green. No. We've been completely green. We're using just solar energy, importing green energy, and exporting loads. We're sharing it with everyone else. The import and export view from My Energy looks like this, and this is quite a nice chart. Again, isn't it interesting when the data is presented slightly differently in different charts? It looks different and gives you a different understanding of what's going on. All of the yellow is export. You can see what days we exported and how much we exported, and what days we hardly exported any. So even on a day when we only generated 5 or 6 kilowatt hours, we still exported quite a lot because I kept exporting during the night from the battery. Onto usage then. The eddy for heating our hot water, just 60 kilowatt hours. The Zappi, 201 kilowatt hours. And the house, 308 kilowatt hours. These numbers are quite low. I've now reduced the amount of hot water we're heating, plus also the ambient temperature of the cold water coming in is warmer than it is at winter, so we don't need as many kilowatt hours to heat it up. We haven't driven as far in May, so the Zappi hasn't been used as much. And the house, well, no heating in May apart from one day. This is the chart from the Shelly power monitor that we use to monitor the circuit. So in the distribution board in the garage, we have a CT clip over the circuit that the air conditioning is connected to, and that's what gives us this monitoring. And as you can see, nearly every single day, it was just on standby. We just had standby usage, which is 0.278 of a kilowatt hour every day. And on one day, we used 2 kilowatt hours of heating. That's all. So 10 kilowatt hours for the entire month of May, heating-wise. This chart from Home Assistant is always popular, showing us the kilowatt hours per individual device in the house. So the Zappi, that used 192 kilowatt hours. The Eddy for heating hot water, 60 kilowatt hours. The kitchen sockets used 53.5 kilowatt hours. That includes our oven, which is just a 13 amp plug on it. The Eddy solar heating was 17.48 kilowatt hours, which is included in the 60 kilowatt hours earlier. The TV, we used just 17 kilowatt hours. The Internet and Home Assistant hub and the My Energy hub in there as well, that was 10 kilowatt hours. The main induction hob, that's a separate monitor, 9.57 kilowatt hours. And the Zappi solar usage, 9.55 kilowatt hours. On one day, I actually consumed some solar on our Zappi, which we don't normally do. We normally only charge it from cheap rate energy overnight. And that was because we had a friend round. Rowley came round in his Renault E-Tech and I gave him a charge. So we used some solar on that day. The Toshiba air conditioning, it says 8.87 kilowatt hours, but we know it was actually 10. There's a little bit of a disparity there because those monitors were down on Home Assistant for a little period. And Mixergy, we used, what did that say? Was that 3 kilowatt hours? That was when we were doing a cleanse of the tank to make sure there's no Legionella in the tank. So the last chart we'll show is from Home Assistant, showing our temperatures in all of these different rooms, including the loft, which is basically indicative of the outside temperature, so that's the orange one. But if you focus on the middle there, on the greenish yellow line in the middle, you can see that up until about the 14th, 15th, temperatures were rising nicely up to 20 degrees indoors. On the green one, what's that? It's our cloakroom temperature. But then it drops off and everything starts to drop off on about the 16th, 17th. So we had a cold snap. And then it stays consistent for the rest of the month until the end of the month where it drops again, where we're now in the middle of another cold spell. Lots of rain, lots of cloud, and it is quite cold. Not quite cold enough to put the heating on, though. I do get asked quite a lot, how do we get these charts and all of this data? It's Home Assistant, and you basically plug in a Zigbee hub into the Home Assistant box, and that they can then receive information from Zigbee devices. So we have Zigbee, Sonoff, and Aqara temperature and humidity sensors around the house. That transmits data to the hub. Home Assistant records it, then I can chart it. That's what we're doing. But do I need to change what I'm doing and how I'm doing it? So my new strategy of exporting everything, because it's profitable to do it, exporting 930 kilowatt hours this month. Should I move over to the Octopus Flux tariff? And what difference will that make? That's something I now want to look at, because this chart is quite key. How do we use our energy? We're not using very much solar, we're not using very much battery, but we are using a lot from the grid because it's cheap to do it. So the strategy we've got is all about money. But is there even more money to be made if I move across to the Octopus Flux tariff? And that's what I want to look at next, because it pays something like 30 pence a kilowatt hour or something close to that if we export during 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the evening. I've got a decent sized battery. I could do that. So that's next on my agenda, to have a look at the Octopus Flux tariff and analyse my numbers to see whether I can make sense of it and whether there's even more money to be made. Because I've got to say, I didn't think I'd want to move over to an export tariff. I thought I was quite happy with bills for the year of a couple of £100. Who wouldn't want electricity bills of just a couple of £100? So it's only £10 or £20 a month. Well, yeah, I'd like an energy bill of minus £500 a year. That would be even better. So I have quite enjoyed moving over to an export tariff. So why not look again and look at what difference would it make if I moved over to Flux? So that's coming soon. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope there's some useful statistics there for you to compare to or to gain information on if you're thinking of installing solar. Let me know in the comments how you're getting on and what your plans are. I really do enjoy reading the comments and seeing how you're getting on, and I will try to reply to every single one. Hopefully next month I'll give you an update on this solar array that's installed in the garden. I do want to get it connected and get it generating, and that's hopefully what I can give you an update on next month. I'm going to push Solis, push my installer, and try and get that install done as soon as possible. Anyway, thank you so much. Take care. See you again soon for more videos. Bye for now.